On a hot summer night in 1952, the skies above Washington DC became the center of one of America's strangest mysteries. Bright objects appeared over the nation's capital, moving across radar screens and catching the attention of pilots, military personnel, and stunned witnesses. The reports were so unusual that they reached the highest levels of the U.S. government, while newspapers questioned what was really happening above the Capitol. But decades later, another mystery began drawing attention to the same era, not because something appeared in the sky, but because something seemed to disappear. Astronomical observations from the 20th century contain puzzling cases in which objects recorded in one observation were seemingly absent from another. These unexplained, vanishing stars have raised an unsettling question. Were some of these observations simply errors, unusual astronomical events, or evidence of something scientists still do not fully understand? The mystery becomes even more intriguing when researchers examine the possibility that some brief flashes could have come from objects reflecting sunlight high above Earth. Could a phenomenon once mistaken for something extraordinary have a scientific explanation? Or are we looking at two separate mysteries that history accidentally placed on the same timeline? To understand what really happened, we have to return to the summer of 1952. When Washington watched the skies, radar screens lit up, and America found itself asking a question that still echoes today: what exactly was flying above the Capitol? The mystery over Washington did not begin with a single strange light. During the summer of 1952, reports of unidentified objects arrived from multiple observers, including pilots and radar operators who described unusual targets moving across the skies around the Capitol. On several occasions, the objects appeared to behave in ways that seemed difficult to explain with the aircraft technology of the time. The situation became serious enough for military officials to investigate, while radar operators attempted to determine whether the signals were caused by ordinary aircraft, atmospheric effects, or something else. Then came the question that would make the 1952 incidents famous. If these objects were real, why could they be detected by radar but remain difficult to identify visually? Skeptics argued that unusual weather and temperature conditions could produce misleading radar returns, while others believed that misidentification and human perception played a major role. Yet the mystery did not end when the sightings disappeared. Years later, researchers examining historical astronomical records encountered another strange problem. Certain brief astronomical objects seemed to appear in one observation and then be absent from another. In a universe where stars normally remain visible for unimaginably long periods, that apparent disappearance seemed almost impossible. Were these simply photographic mistakes, transient flashes, or something moving through space between observations? The deeper researchers looked, the more complicated the puzzle became, and the connection to the strange skies of 1952 became impossible to ignore. But what exactly does it mean for a star to vanish? In astronomy, the answer is far less mysterious, and sometimes far more complicated, than the word suggests. Stars do not normally disappear from the universe overnight. Instead, a brief object captured in an old photograph can later be missing for several possible reasons. The photographic plate itself may contain defects, dust, scratches, or chemical imperfections. A passing object might reflect sunlight for only a short period before moving out of view. Even atmospheric conditions can influence what an observer sees from Earth. Yet some historical cases have continued to attract attention because the objects appeared bright enough to be recorded, while later observations failed to find anything at the same location. This is where the investigation becomes fascinating. Researchers began asking whether some of these fleeting points of light could have been artificial objects rather than distant stars. A metallic object orbiting Earth could briefly reflect sunlight toward a telescope, producing a sudden flash before its position changed. In the right conditions, an observer could record the flash without ever seeing the object again. Long before satellites became common, such an explanation would have sounded almost impossible. But the space age changed what scientists considered possible. By examining old photographs alongside modern knowledge of orbital motion, researchers could begin testing whether these mysterious points followed patterns consistent with objects passing near Earth. The question was no longer simply, where did the stars go? It became something much more precise. What was actually captured in those photographs? The possibility of reflected sunlight offers an intriguing explanation, but it does not automatically solve the mystery. To determine whether a brief flash could really come from an object orbiting Earth, researchers would need more than a photograph. They would need evidence of movement, timing, brightness, and position. This is where historical records become important. If an object appeared in one observation and disappeared soon afterward, its location could potentially reveal whether it was moving across the sky rather than remaining fixed like a distant star. The same principle helps explain why the 1952 Washington sightings remain so difficult to dismiss completely. Radar operators were not simply looking at photographs. They were tracking signals that appeared to move through the sky. Yet that evidence also has limitations. Early radar systems were vulnerable to unusual atmospheric conditions, and operators could sometimes interpret unexpected returns as aircraft or other objects. Human observers could also misjudge distance and speed when viewing isolated lights against a dark sky. Scientists therefore face a difficult task, separating genuine unexplained events from errors created by technology, weather, photography, and human perception. The most fascinating possibility is that some of these mysteries may have ordinary explanations that only became understandable decades later. But even if a scientific explanation accounts for some cases, it does not automatically explain every report. And that leaves one important question hanging over the entire investigation. Were the strange lights seen above Washington and the mysterious objects recorded by astronomers actually connected? Or are we trying to connect two unrelated mysteries simply because they occurred during the same extraordinary era? After decades of investigation, the truth behind the vanishing stars remains frustratingly incomplete. Some cases may eventually be explained by photographic defects, atmospheric conditions, fleeting reflections, or objects moving through near-Earth space. The strange events over Washington in 1952 may also have involved a combination of radar limitations, weather, human perception, and observations that were simply difficult to identify at the time. But science has never required every mystery to have an immediate answer. What makes these stories remarkable is the evidence that survives. Old photographs, radar records, witness reports, military documents, and astronomical observations that allow each generation to ask new questions with better tools. Perhaps the vanishing stars were never disappearing stars at all. Perhaps they were brief flashes from objects crossing the right place at exactly the right moment. Or perhaps some observations still contain clues that researchers have not fully understood. What we can say with confidence is that the summer of 1952 left behind more than a collection of strange reports. It created a mystery that sits at the intersection of astronomy, technology, human perception, and one of America's most famous unexplained episodes. And tonight, when you look up at the stars, remember this: not every light in the sky is what it first appears to be. Some can be explained. Some can be mistaken. And a few may leave us with nothing but a photograph, a question, and a mystery that refuses to disappear.